OpenAI has banned goblins. And we're going to be talking about what this means, why this happened, and looking at the larger picture here about AI tells and how to make sure your AI writing is undetectable, or if you're trying to detect AI writing, what you should be looking for. I'm going to be walking you through a few resources, including the ones that I personally use, which can be built into your workflows to make sure your writing does not sound like AI, or conversely to help you spot and find artificial intelligence. And this is very pressing right now because Wikipedia just banned AI writing on their site, and we're seeing quite a backlash against AI writing as a whole. And Goblins from OpenAI is just the most recent. We're going to be having a look at the Goblins. We're going to have a look at all the nerdy stuff that's been going on. Then I'm going to be walking you through how we can actually practically use this. You may have heard over the last couple of weeks that OpenAI has categorically banned the use of Goblins inside of their models. I'll show you what that actually looks like inside of the Codex model. So this is the Codex system instructions. So we see here the base instructions are: you are Codex, a coding agent based on GPT-5. You and the user share one workspace. Your job is to collaborate with them until their goal is achieved. This is the instructions underlying the model. Now, if we're going to do a quick search here, watch what happens. Goblin. Never talk about goblins, gremlins, raccoons, trolls, ogres, pigeons, or other animals or creatures unless it is absolutely and unambiguously relevant to the user's query. Now, that is a weird thing to have inside of your model, and this was spotted last week and has caused some amount of discussion. So very interesting, and OpenAI have actually put out a paper where the goblins came from, which we'll have a look at in a moment. Let's have a look at what actually happened and why OpenAI have explicitly told their models not to mention goblins. Why goblins? Now, there's a technical reason for this. We have seen many different verbal tics that have appeared inside of our large language models over the last few years. I'm going to go through a few of the famous ones: delve, M dashes, for example, but the most recent one is goblins. The reason this happened is explained in great detail in this article from OpenAI. This came out a few days ago. I'm going to put it in the newsletter. It's highly worth reading. It's very interesting. Basically, goblin, gremlin, and various other creatures started to appear an awful lot more inside of their models. The reason for this is this particular feedback loop. So inside of their reinforcement learning, inside of how they were training their models and improving their models, they rewarded a playful style. If those playful styles were rewarded, then if those playful styles included a particular lexical tic, a particular turn of phrase that came up again and again, that would be rewarded more. That led to it being used more and more in rollouts, and then those rollouts were used in supervised learning of the model. Basically, it was learning from itself and becoming more and more comfortable producing the tic. It was learning to do that more and more. This happened with goblins in particular because of a particular language mode called the nerdy personality. So in ChatGPT, you can set up what kind of personality you want it to have. I think there's cynical, nerdy, there's one that's like straightforward, I forget, the direct, I think it's called. These personality types. One of them is called nerdy, and inside of the nerdy instructions were some additional references to use kind of mythical creatures like goblins, like centaurs, what did the other ones say? Mentioned ogres, trolls, raccoons for some reason. These were words that were heavily incentivized by this nerdy model because it's like D&D video games nerdiness. So they started to appear in the model, and then that created a reinforcement loop, a feedback loop, which led to it spreading out all over the model. So there's a great big breakdown inside of OpenAI. Obviously, the particular example of goblins, of gremlins, of ogres is a bit silly, but with what is useful here is to see how these models develop these verbal tics. How do they get to a point where they are using M dashes all the time, where they're using certain turns of phrase, which we know are artificial intelligence, and we can spot them a mile away, but they're still used and reinforced within the model. So what I'm going to talk about is those verbal tics and how you can practically avoid them inside of your AI output. I'm also going to give you a checklist at the end. So AI tells are language patterns that appear consistently in AI, and they tell us that an AI has written it. There are some that you're going to recognize immediately. I can see one right here, these M dashes. M dashes are obviously something that humans use, but they have increasingly become a tell to tell us that, okay, no, this is probably written by artificial intelligence, because not that many humans actually use them. And this can be in vocabulary, so words like delve, for example. It could be in structure, the use of em dashes, and it could be in tone. We'll go through a couple of examples here. And the tells exist because AI models are trained on the same data, rewarded for the same signal again and again and again, and they optimize towards those particular preferences. So the mechanism is working, but it's working in overdrive, and it leads to certain types of usage, certain types of language being overly used inside of artificial intelligence. Let's have a look at the wall of shame. There's certainly a few. Oh, gosh, I shouldn't say certainly, because that is one of them. So famously, there are words like delve. Delve appeared and exploded into popular usage a couple of years ago. It's now been tampered down. We're going to talk about this in a moment, how AI tells, once they are known, can be explicitly removed from the model, like this inside of the system instructions. We also have nuance, tapestry, that was a great one. Navigate, foster, leverage, pivotal, meticulous, underscore, vibrant, robust, showcase, multifaceted. These kind of words. Words that you don't normally see in that much frequency in human written language tend to be overused inside of artificial intelligence. And once you know these words, once you recognize them, you'll start to see them all over. If you want good practice for this, go on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is wild for this. The posts and the comments for the posts are very much AI generated, so it's a really good place to hone your skills here. Structure. It's not X, it's Y. You probably recognize this one an awful lot. You're not X, you're Y. Bullet points for everything. Claude would be like, okay, let's stick that in bullet points to make them more readable. It's like, no, stop it. Absolutely stop that. Markdown headers for 2-sentence answers, key takeaways in conclusion, etc. These are all things that you know. What I'm actually going to give you is a 15,000 word guide that goes through all of these in great detail, probably more detail than you ever need to use, but I'm going to show you how to practically use that as well. And then things like tones and openers, things like great question. Great question is an amazing one here. So here's a before example. In today's rapidly evolving landscape, it is pivotal to leverage innovative solutions that foster growth and drive impactful outcomes. Sounds great, doesn't mean much. So often AI writing has this kind of highfalutin style where these words are used and it makes it feel like it's valuable, but when you actually get into it, it isn't. These are the wall of shame, but there are many, many more. So what I want to show you is probably one of the best resources for this, which is Wikipedia's list. Now, Wikipedia has banned AI writing as of March. So 2 months ago, they banned it. They have a list which is incredibly valuable. Now, it is not a Wikipedia page per se, but a guide for the contributors, the people who write and maintain the website. It's about 15,000 words and it is maintained by the editor community. And because they are so against artificial intelligence writing, basically poisoning Wikipedia, they are really, really on top of this. So I'll show you what this looks like. This is the full list, Wikipedia Signs of AI Writing. This is an incredibly extensive guide. Again, this is about 15,000 words. It goes on and on and on. But you can see on the left-hand side, we have things like content, undue emphasis on significance, legacy, and broader trends. So words to watch for: stands, serves as, is a testament / reminder, a vital, significant, pivotal, key role, moment, underscores, highlights, etc. Represents, marks a shift, a key turning point. Undue emphasis on notability, superficial analyses, promotional and advertisement-like languages. So words to watch for are boasts a vibrant, rich, profound, enhancing, exemplifies, natural beauty, vague attributions and overgeneralizations of opinions. Here we go. It's not X, it is also Y. This is known as a negative parallelism. That's what it's actually called. It's not X, it's Y, or no X, no Y, just Z. You know these. If you use AI, you recognize these implicitly. But this list goes on and on because the Wikipedia community are vehemently protecting from AI writing right now. So obviously you can read through this and it's fascinating to read, but we want to make this more practical. We want to be smart about that. So how are we going to do that? What we're going to do is we are going to condense this Wikipedia Signs of Writing into a set of instructions that we can feed into our AI and say, hey, don't do this. All this stuff here, don't do that. So we're going to use it against Wikipedia. Sorry, guys. I know this wasn't your intention, but you have inadvertently created one of the greatest resources for making our writing sound less like artificial intelligence. So we're going to do this in two ways. First thing you can do, you can take this whole page, you feed it into AI, feed it into Claude, feed it into ChatGPT, and you say, hey, summarize this and turn this into a set of instructions I'm going to put into my custom instructions. I'm going to put into my project instructions. I'm going to put into an MD file if you're using Claude Code, for example. And then I want you to follow these when you are creating written outputs. So that is layer one. Before we write, we bake these rules in as instructions that are going to be used every time we create a draft. So a few different ways to do that. The basic way is you are going to create a compressed version. Now, somebody's already done that. This is called humaniser, which is a skill. Somebody's turned it into a set of instructions, which you can provide to your LLM, and it will use these upfront to avoid these. Now, this will work and it will remove an awful lot of AI ticks, AI tells from your writing, but not all of them. So if you are producing something that really does need to not sound like artificial intelligence, then you're going to belt and braces this. You're going to add a second layer. So you're going to have one before you write with these system instructions, these project instructions, this prompt. Second, after we write. So you're going to draft it. You're going to then check your output using a skill file. So again, what we're basically going to do is run it through the same set of filters, these Wikipedia signs of AI writing, and have it check based on its output. So we're doing it on the way in and we're doing it on the way out, if that makes sense. It's belt and braces in order to get a higher accuracy level. Now, the way you can do this is, well, one, you can copy and paste all of this into your prompt and say, can you check my draft against it? That's fine, but that's quite a basic way to do it. You can also install this humaniser as a skill. So if you're using Claude or ChatGPT, you'll install it as a skill, and then you will use that skill by typing /humaniser, invoke that skill. It will check against this checklist of items, and it will redraft based on that. So this is the very simple way to use this. You're going to use the Wikipedia signs of AI. You're going to use it before you write, and then you're going to use it after you write, and it's going to clean out your draft. This is only when you really do need to make it sound more human. I still highly recommend also doing a human check or a human rewrite. Depending on what you are creating, that's still going to be essential. If you are writing a book, well, one, you should probably be writing it yourself manually, but if you are using AI, you should definitely be rewriting absolutely everything. However, if you're writing an email, does it matter? No, not really. So you need to apply the level of effort depending on the task itself. AI detectors. I think it is worth talking about these because I see them popping up all of the time, especially people spamming in my comments on social media. Oh, you should use Turnitin, or you should use Copy Leaks, or whatever the new one's called. They don't work. They're trash. They have been proven again and again and again not to work. OpenAI, interestingly, actually had an AI text classifier division, which they set up, I think it was back in 2023. Yeah, they launched it in January. And then about 6 months later, they're like, no, we can't do it. Our classification, our detection tools cannot keep up with our generation tools. So AI gets better and better and better and better at generating and sounding more human, whereas detection has not been improving. And if you stop and think about this for a second, that makes sense. There's a huge amount of money being thrown into generation. There is very little money, time, and effort being thrown into detection because most people don't care. And it's not going to be able to keep up with the billions and billions being spent on making our models better at generation. So it's a losing game. That doesn't stop companies trying to market and say that these things work, but they do not work. And they're being used in academic institutions, and increasingly in America in particular, the academic institutions are getting sued for wrongly saying that things are being generated by AI. Once enough of these cases go through and enough damages are being paid, these are basically going to be banned within academic institutions because they're insufficient for the task and extremely damaging when they falsely identify something as AI writing. Does that mean that students are not using AI? No, of course they are. But we can't detect it. We cannot detect it reliably enough. And it also disproportionately penalizes non-native English speakers, people who might use more formulaic language because they've learned it as a second language. So they're using turns of phrases that they've learned. I know when I learn a second language, I rely on turns of phrases and pre-made phrases a lot more. So those things are being detected a lot more and penalizing non-native English speakers compared to native English speakers. So these are basically useless, at worst, actively harmful. So absolute trash. No academic institution recommends using them anymore as sole evidence. It has to be connected with the tutor or the teacher's knowledge of that student, and it's used as a supplementary piece of evidence. But people are increasingly realizing that these do not work. There was a paper, I think it was the end of AI detection. This was a guy called J. Scott Christensen. This was back in 2024. And he said, which I love, "It is a race that can't be won. The only winning move in the AI writing versus AI detection war is not to play." He is, of course, quoting war games there. All of this is a moving target. This list on Wikipedia is a living document. It is updated all of the time. Let's see if they've got goblins. They haven't added goblins. That's interesting. Very interesting. So they haven't fully updated this. So you could still get away with goblins on Wikipedia. You won't get in trouble. This is because the tells change. So delve, for example, used to be the big tell. Who was it? It was Paul Graham. Back in 2024, there was a tweet that went viral, him saying, "Someone sent me a cold email. I noticed it used the word delve. It is a sign that text was written by ChatGPT." This went viral, and delve became the word that everybody kind of joked about as the very obvious use of ChatGPT. Now that has basically been removed from the large language model. That can be done crudely, like in this case with the codex system instructions here. Never talk about goblins, gremlins, raccoons, trolls, pigeons, or other animals or creatures unless it is absolutely and unambiguously relevant to the task. Raccoons, trolls, gremlins, and goblins are required, but this has been hard-coded into the instructions to remove that word. And also over time, these words can be removed using training. So when it comes to reinforcement learning, when it comes to scoring the answers coming from these models, we can increasingly remove these words. So what this means is that we have a tick which becomes very popular. Everybody learns about it, and then it decreases because the model makers can remove it. The M dash was another example. OpenAI explicitly said, "We have fixed it and our model is no longer using M dashes." But the main thing here is it is a moving target. So what you knew about AI detection, what you knew about AI tells and giveaways may not be correct anymore. So you have to keep up to date. Two implications here. If you are trying to spot AI, read widely, keep your eyes open, kind of assume that everything is AI and look for those giveaways. Twitter is generally where these things become known very early, but they will come onto this Wikipedia Signs of AI writing. Also, if you want to train your brain to look for it, go to LinkedIn. I mean, I can pull up LinkedIn right now, and I'm sure within a few seconds find an AI-generated article or post that has a bunch of AI-generated comments on it. Okay. The point is that the model makers will patch out, they will reinforce out these particular tells over time, so you need to pay attention. This is also important if you're trying to write without. So two sides of the coin here. Either you're trying to detect it and call it out, or you're trying to write and not get called out. Two different objectives here. If you are doing this, you need to update your instructions here and your skill file here. So it's no good if you have a custom instruction that has the tells, the ticks, the giveaways from 2023, and you're telling your model not to do that. That's not going to help. You need to constantly upgrade that. So of course, this is going to be the best source for that because it has all of the tells, and this is a living document. So highly, highly recommend you this as a resource. So this does bring us to the question though, does anyone actually care? This is a losing battle. More and more content is being written by artificial intelligence. That content is getting better and better and better and better. Increasingly, people do not notice. I've seen posts on Reddit, which I know are very obviously AI written, but there will be 80, 100 people commenting and having a discussion underneath. Most of them human, I assume. But that means that increasingly people can't tell the difference. and they're consuming and engaging with that content to the same level as if it was written by a human, and they don't particularly care. Now, when people find out it's AI, then they care because they feel like they've been hoodwinked. They feel like they've been in some way tricked. There's a really interesting paradox about disclosure where 94% of news consumers say journalists should disclose AI use. To be fair, it's a bit of a leading question. If you ask somebody, hey, do you think journalists should disclose if they use AI or not? Most people are going to say yes. Like, very few people are going to say no. And I imagine this 96%, the 6% remaining were like, I don't know, or I'm indifferent. So 94% of people say consumers say journalists should disclose AI usage. However, 42% trust the story less after seeing an AI disclosure. So this leads to this gap here where we want people to say if they're using AI, but as soon as they do, we're like, screw you then, I'm not reading that. Whereas most of the time, if you don't disclose it, people will probably just consume the content and be fine with it. Even if they find out later and they get upset about it, for the most part, people aren't going to care. Whether or not that's ethical, whether or not that is philosophically okay with you, is up to you to make that judgment. If people get the same value from it, even though it's generated by AI, is that a problem? I think increasingly as the years go forward, that will not. So people think they care, but for the most part will not notice the difference. There was a little test done by the New York Times where they had AI generated versus non-AI generated texts, and the non-AI generated were from people like Ursula Le Guin, Carl Sagan, I think Cormac McCarthy, so great writers. And they asked people, which do you prefer? And most people preferred the AI written content over the human, which is, something that we're going to have to deal with as a species moving forward. Anyway, from a practical point of view, what we need to focus on right now is how you can actually use things like the Wikipedia Science of AI Writing to improve your AI outputs. So a couple of free resources are going to be in the newsletter if you're watching this live. Or check the link down below this video and there'll be a link to get them directly. I'm going to put together a cheat sheet, basically a list of tells, so you can review it without having to read through 15,000 words of Wikipedia, because as useful as it is, that is a bit much. I'm also going to put together a skill file plus some instructions on how to actually use it inside of Claude and ChatGPT that you can use for your belt and braces layer 1 and layer 2. And I'll give you instructions about how to set this system up as well so that you can increase the quality of your outputs. So as always, that is going to be free in the newsletter. You can sign up for that at aiwithkyle.com. If you come to the website, there's a subscribe form here, or up here, join the community, and you're going to get the resources, the newsletter, plus a bunch of free courses, catalogue of playbooks, etc., etc. That is all totally free. So come along to AI with Kyle for that. And hopefully that will be useful. Fantastic. I will see you guys